Have you ever stopped to consider why the very individuals who preserved and passed down the Bible, and who spent countless centuries longing for the arrival of the Messiah, ultimately reject Jesus as that long-awaited Savior? This is a question that has left Christians scratching their heads for over 2,000 years, and today we are going to delve into it to uncover the answers. Imagine this: a group of people chosen by God, entrusted with divine prophecies and sacred promises, anxiously awaiting their deliverer, only to fail to recognize him when he finally appears. Doesn't it sound like an incredible twist in the grand story of divine plans and interventions? However, this scenario isn't fiction at all. It's a real historical event that has profoundly shaped religious history and still influences our world in countless ways even now. At this point, you might be thinking that the explanation must be straightforward and easy to grasp. Perhaps you're assuming it's as simple as saying they just didn't have faith. But wait a moment, because the reality is far deeper, more intricate, and even more intriguing than you might initially think. We are about to set out on an incredible journey that weaves through history, theology, and culture, a journey that will challenge your preconceived notions and greatly enrich your understanding. From the bustling and dusty streets of ancient Jerusalem to the thriving Jewish communities of modern times, we will uncover the genuine reasons behind this enduring rejection. And I must say, what we are about to discover has the potential to completely reshape not only how you see Jewish-Christian relationships, but also how you perceive your own faith journey. So get ready, buckle up, keep your minds open, and prepare your hearts for what's to come. We're about to take a deep dive into one of the most captivating and thought-provoking religious mysteries of all time. By the conclusion of this video, you'll gain insights that many Christians may never have contemplated, and you'll be equipped with knowledge that can help bridge divides and encourage meaningful dialogue. Are you ready to experience a transformation in how you perceive this profound issue? Let's embark on this enlightening and thought-provoking exploration into why the Jewish people reject Jesus as their Messiah. Believe me when I say that the reasons will astonish you, test your assumptions, and ultimately strengthen your faith in ways you may never have anticipated. To fully comprehend why the Jewish people do not accept Jesus as the Messiah, we must step back in time to the lively and crowded streets of ancient Israel. Picture yourself in that setting, surrounded by the noisy chatter of a marketplace, the rich and exotic aroma of spices, and the passionate debates about the long-promised Messiah. It's a world that feels so distant from the one we live in today, yet it contains crucial answers to our question. Back in those times, the atmosphere was charged with eager anticipation and expectation. The Jewish people had faced and survived centuries of oppression under the rule of the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and now the iron grip of Roman authority. They held tightly to the sacred promises recorded in their scriptures, prophecies of a deliverer who would bring restoration and elevate their nation to its former greatness. Yet what kind of deliverer were they truly expecting? This is the point where the narrative starts to become truly fascinating. The expectations surrounding the Messiah in ancient Israel were significantly more layered and intricate than most of us realize today. They were not anticipating a spiritual savior in the way that Jesus is understood within Christianity. No, their aspirations were fixed on a completely different type of Messiah. Imagine a warrior king, a direct descendant of King David, triumphantly riding in on a war horse with a sword in hand. This Messiah was envisioned as someone who would overthrow their oppressors, restore the Davidic dynasty to its former glory, and initiate a new era of peace and prosperity for the nation of Israel, as the prophet Isaiah foretold. To us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. Isaiah 9:6. However, their expectations weren't limited to just political freedom and independence. The era of the Messiah was also anticipated to herald a time of profound spiritual renewal and revival. The prophet Jeremiah described a future time when God would establish a new covenant with his people, writing his law on their hearts. Jeremiah 31:31-33. The people also longed for the restoration of temple worship and the return of the exiles scattered across the farthest corners of the earth. Here's where things truly become even more fascinating and thought-provoking. These messianic expectations weren't mere wishful fantasies or vague hopes. They were deeply and firmly grounded in centuries of rich prophecy and well-established traditions. The Jewish people had meticulously studied and interpreted their sacred scriptures, weaving together a complex and vibrant tapestry of messianic beliefs and expectations. For example, they looked to scriptures such as Daniel 7:13 to 14, which describes one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven and being given authority over all peoples. They also reflected on passages like Zechariah 9:9 to 10, which portrays a king coming to Jerusalem, righteous and having salvation riding on a donkey. But here's the pivotal point to understand. This insight is absolutely essential to grasp the Jewish rejection of Jesus as the Messiah. These prophetic texts were frequently interpreted in the context of the people's immediate and current circumstances. During the period of Roman rule, the vision of a conquering Messiah who would reclaim Israel's political independence held immense appeal and significance. Therefore, when Jesus arrived, proclaiming a message centered on spiritual redemption, rather than leading a political revolt, it becomes quite clear why so many were doubtful. His mission and teachings did not align with the dominant messianic hopes and expectations of that era. Understanding this historical background is vital because it reveals that the Jewish rejection of Jesus was not simply due to obstinacy or spiritual blindness. Instead, it was deeply rooted in centuries of thoughtfully developed theological beliefs and an enduring hope for the restoration of their nation. Let's delve straight into the core of the issue: the theological divide that separates Jewish and Christian understandings of messianic prophecies. This division isn't simply about having differing opinions. It's a profound divergence in how the same sacred texts are interpreted and understood. Picture yourself holding an ancient scroll in your hands. The parchment is aged, worn, and weathered by centuries of time. The words written on it remain the same, whether you are Jewish or Christian, but the meaning you extract from those words could be entirely different. This difference is the very essence of the theological gap between us. Consider, for example, the well-known prophecy found in Isaiah 7:14. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. As Christians, we instinctively link this prophecy to the miraculous birth of Jesus. But from a Jewish standpoint, this verse is understood in a completely different context and carries an entirely different meaning. In the original Hebrew language, the term translated as virgin is Alma, which is more accurately interpreted as a young woman of marriageable age. Jewish scholars assert that this prophecy was fulfilled during Isaiah's own lifetime, referring to a specific event in his era rather than predicting a Messiah to come in the distant future. They interpret it as a divine sign given to King Ahaz, foretelling the defeat of his enemies, rather than a prophecy about a miraculous virgin birth centuries afterward. Now let's turn our attention to another significant prophecy, the depiction of the suffering servant in Isaiah 53. Christians widely interpret this passage as a direct and unmistakable prophecy about the sacrificial death of Jesus. In contrast, Jewish interpretations understand this passage as a symbolic representation of the nation of Israel, enduring immense suffering for the greater benefit of the world. These divergent interpretations are not limited to these examples, but extend to many other biblical prophecies. For instance, Micah 5:2, which Christians believe predicts Jesus' birth in Bethlehem, is understood by Jewish scholars as a reference to the Messiah's familial lineage, rather than the location of his birth. Zechariah 12:10, they will look on me. The phrase, the one they have pierced, is viewed by Christians as a prophecy of the crucifixion of Jesus, while Jewish scholars interpret it as a description of the nation's collective mourning over a tragic loss. However, this debate isn't solely about specific individual verses. The overarching idea of what the Messiah is meant to be and accomplish differs dramatically between the two faiths. According to Jewish tradition, the Messiah is expected to meet several specific criteria: gathering the dispersed Jewish exiles, rebuilding the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, establishing global peace, and spreading universal awareness and knowledge of God. From a Jewish point of view, Jesus did not achieve or fulfill any of these key requirements. Additionally, the concept of a Messiah who suffers and dies for the sins of others is entirely unfamiliar and even contradictory to traditional Jewish beliefs. Within Jewish theology, every individual is seen as accountable for their own sins, with repentance and the performance of good deeds serving as the means to obtain forgiveness. The Christian idea of vicarious atonement, where Jesus' death serves as a substitutionary sacrifice for others' sins, represents a significant theological obstacle for Jewish understanding. Another critical point of divergence is the fundamental understanding of the Messiah's nature and identity. Christianity's belief that Jesus is both fully divine and fully human stands in direct opposition to the Jewish view of God as indivisible and entirely non-corporeal. The notion of God taking on human form is regarded as irreconcilable with the strict monotheism central to Jewish faith. It is essential to recognize that these differences are not merely academic or abstract debates. These are deeply rooted convictions, grounded in centuries of rigorous study, tradition, and religious practice. For numerous Jewish individuals, embracing Jesus as the Messiah would require a complete reinterpretation of their sacred texts, cultural identity, and historical heritage. This theological separation serves as a reminder of the profound complexity inherent in matters of faith and scriptural interpretation. It encourages us to approach our personal beliefs with humility, acknowledging that identical words can yield vastly different meanings based on one's cultural background and religious tradition. When discussing why Jewish people do not accept Jesus as the Messiah, we are not simply addressing ancient scriptures or theological arguments. Instead, we are delving into the deeply personal and communal realm of identity, a force so profound that it shapes beliefs, influences behaviors, and defines entire cultures. To fully grasp this rejection, we must appreciate the deeply entrenched Jewish identity, one that has been shaped over millennia through rich traditions, historical continuity, and periods of profound adversity. Imagine for just a moment that you belong to a group of people who have successfully preserved their distinct and unique identity for more than 4,000 years. Despite being dispersed across the world and enduring countless instances of persecution and efforts to force conversion, you have steadfastly held on to your traditions, beliefs, and core identity. This is precisely the enduring reality of the Jewish people. Their identity is not merely a label or a title. It is a living, breathing, and inseparable part of who they are as a people. At the very heart of this identity lies the profound idea of being God's chosen people, as expressed in Deuteronomy 7:6. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession. This divine chosenness carries with it a profound responsibility to act as a light to the nations and to faithfully uphold God's commandments. Now think about how embracing Jesus as the Messiah could fundamentally alter this deeply rooted identity. For many Jewish people, accepting Jesus is far more than simply adopting a new set of religious beliefs. It is often seen as a transformative and fundamental change in the very essence of who they are. It is perceived as stepping away from the close-knit community and rich heritage that have shaped and defined their identity for countless generations. Furthermore, Jewish identity is deeply connected to religious practices, observance of commandments, and rituals. The Torah outlines 613 mitzvot, or commandments, which encompass a wide range of life aspects, from dietary laws to the observance of the Sabbath. These commandments are not merely religious ceremonies. They are the very fabric of daily living, deeply embedded in family traditions and the bonds that hold communities together. Christianity, with its emphasis on faith over the observance of law, presents a stark departure from this deeply ingrained way of life. Additionally, the historical context of Jewish-Christian relations must also be taken into account. For centuries, Jewish people were subjected to intense pressure to convert to Christianity, often facing the threat of persecution or even death. This history has left lasting and painful scars on the collective Jewish memory and identity. For many, accepting Jesus is viewed as a betrayal of the countless ancestors who endured immense suffering to preserve their faith and cultural identity. Moreover, the Holocaust, a tragedy still vividly remembered by many, has heightened the urgency to protect and maintain Jewish identity in the face of near destruction. Many Jewish people feel a deep and enduring obligation to ensure the survival and continuity of their traditions, culture, and community. Adopting a faith that has often been linked with their oppressors throughout history can be seen as a rejection of this solemn responsibility. It is also important to understand that Jewish identity is not exclusively defined by religion. For a large number of Jewish people, their identity is just as much about culture, ethnicity, and a shared historical experience as it is about religious belief. Even among secular Jews who do not practice religion, there is often a deep and abiding connection to their Jewish heritage. Accepting Jesus is often viewed as breaking or severing these cultural, historical, and familial ties within Jewish communities. It is precisely this reality. A well-known saying within the Jewish community emphasizes that to be a Jew means to say we instead of I. This collective sense of identity is incredibly powerful and unifying. It offers a profound sense of belonging, a framework for making sense of the world, and a connection to a greater purpose that transcends the individual. The notion of abandoning this shared communal identity to adopt a faith that focuses on individual salvation can be an intensely difficult and emotional challenge. Furthermore, the Jewish concept of messianic redemption is intrinsically linked to the restoration of the nation of Israel and the establishment of universal peace across the world. The Christian focus on personal salvation can feel incompatible with this communal and national vision of messianic redemption held in Jewish thought. Recognizing these cultural and societal factors allows us to understand that the Jewish rejection of Jesus is not merely a matter of theological differences. It is fundamentally about safeguarding an identity that has endured against seemingly insurmountable odds, an identity that offers profound meaning, a strong sense of community, and a deep sense of purpose. To fully comprehend why many Jewish people reject Jesus as the Messiah, we must face a deeply troubling and painful chapter of history, the long and enduring legacy of persecution faced by the Jewish people, often inflicted by those who profess to follow Christ. This history is far more than a collection of isolated events. It is a collective trauma that has been deeply ingrained in the very fabric of Jewish identity and shared memory. Let us embark on a journey through history, beginning with the earliest days of Christianity. At first, the followers of Jesus were regarded as part of a Jewish sect. But as Christianity expanded and eventually became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, tensions between Christians and Jews began to escalate. By the 4th century, when Christianity had been established as the official religion of the Roman Empire, Jewish communities found themselves increasingly marginalized and subjected to widespread persecution. Imagine yourself living in the tumultuous and often dangerous environment of medieval Europe. The Crusades, which were initiated to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control, had devastating consequences for Jewish communities along the way. During the First Crusade in 1096, entire Jewish communities in the Rhineland were brutally destroyed, leaving devastation in their wake. As Crusaders journeyed toward Jerusalem, they turned their violence on nearby Jewish populations, offering them a harrowing choice: convert to Christianity or face execution. Jump ahead to the year 1215, when the Fourth Lateran Council mandated that Jews must wear specific, distinctive clothing to clearly identify them and separate them from the rest of society. This enforced marking of Jews soon became a widespread custom across Europe, further stigmatizing them and making them even more vulnerable to acts of violence and discrimination. The Spanish Inquisition, which began in 1478, resulted in the expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Jews or their forced conversion to Christianity under intense pressure. These events were far from isolated or rare occurrences. Across Europe, Jewish communities were frequently subjected to blood libels, false and malicious accusations claiming they used Christian blood in religious rituals. Such baseless claims often incited violent mobs, leading to massacres and the destruction of entire Jewish communities. In 1349, during the catastrophic outbreak of the Black Death across Europe, Jews were scapegoated and accused of poisoning wells, resulting in widespread persecution and the annihilation of hundreds of Jewish settlements. Although the Reformation sought to reform the Catholic Church in many ways, it did little to curb the persistent problem of anti-Semitism. Martin Luther, who initially expressed hopes of converting Jews to Christianity, later authored vehemently anti-Semitic writings when his efforts to win them over proved unsuccessful. His inflammatory rhetoric was subsequently used as justification for persecution of Jews in Protestant regions. This pattern of systemic discrimination and persecution carried on well into the modern age. In Tsarist Russia, Jewish communities were subjected to oppressive legal restrictions and violent, state-sanctioned pogroms. Then came the Holocaust, the most calculated and systematic effort in history to annihilate the Jewish people entirely. 6 million Jews were brutally murdered by the Nazi regime and its collaborators, many of whom identified as Christians or came from Christian-majority societies. You might now be wondering, but that was in the past. Surely the situation must have changed significantly by now. Indeed, there have been notable improvements in relations between Jews and Christians, particularly following the reforms of the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s. Numerous Christian denominations have formally denounced anti-Semitism and made sincere efforts to foster reconciliation with the Jewish community. Nevertheless, the deep scars left by this painful history continue to linger. For a great number of Jews, Christianity remains deeply associated with centuries of persecution and oppression. While the cross is a powerful symbol of salvation and hope for Christians, it has often represented terror and suffering for Jewish communities. This long-standing historical trauma serves as a major obstacle for many Jews in considering Jesus as the Messiah. Furthermore, this history of enduring persecution has strengthened the Jewish resolve to preserve their identity and protect the integrity of their communities. Embracing Jesus as the Messiah can often be perceived as aligning oneself with a group that has historically attempted to convert or even destroy Jewish communities. It is important to recognize that this perspective is not about assigning blame to modern Christians for the actions of those in the past. Instead, it is about understanding how this painful historical legacy continues to influence Jewish perceptions and responses to Christianity today. For many Jewish people, the rejection of Jesus is not solely based on theological disagreements. It is also a way of honoring the memory of their ancestors who endured great suffering for their faith and ensuring the survival of an identity that has persisted despite overwhelming challenges. This historical context urges us to approach Jewish-Christian dialogue with an attitude of sensitivity, respect, and profound humility. It serves as a reminder of how deeply actions can shape beliefs and how the effects of historical trauma can endure across generations. As we move into the modern era, it is important to acknowledge that Jewish perspectives on Jesus have evolved in some ways over time. Although the traditional stance of rejecting Jesus as the Messiah remains prevalent, there now exists a spectrum of perspectives that reflect the richness of modern Jewish thought and the evolving nature of interfaith relations. Let us begin by considering the mainstream perspective, held primarily by the most observant Jewish communities. Jesus is generally regarded as a historical figure, a Jewish teacher who lived during the 1st century CE and had a significant influence on history. While they may recognize his profound impact on world history, they do not accept claims about his divinity or his role as the Messiah. Rabbi Shmuley Bodiach, a well-known contemporary Jewish thinker, provides a clear example of this mainstream perspective. He explains that Jews do not accept Jesus as the Messiah because Jesus did not fulfill the specific messianic prophecies outlined in Jewish tradition. However, there has been an increasing acknowledgement of Jesus as a significant figure within Jewish history and tradition. Today, many Jewish scholars actively study Jesus within the context of his Jewish heritage and historical background. For example, Amy Jill Levine, a respected Jewish scholar specializing in the New Testament, has dedicated significant research to understanding Jesus within the framework of his Jewish cultural and historical environment. This academic exploration does not imply religious acceptance of Jesus as the Messiah, but rather demonstrates a willingness to engage with his role as an important part of Jewish history. Some liberal Jewish thinkers have taken this exploration a step further. Rabbi Michael Lerner, the editor of Tikkun magazine, has proposed that while Jews should not view Jesus as God or the Messiah, they can respect him as a Jewish teacher who advanced the principles of ethical monotheism. He asserts that many of Jesus' teachings on social justice closely align with the core values of Jewish tradition. There is also the perspective of secular Jews to consider. They may see Jesus as an influential historical and cultural figure, without attaching any religious significance to him. For these individuals, Jesus might be regarded in the same way as other prominent historical figures who shaped world events. It is also important to mention the existence of Messianic Judaism, a movement that seeks to merge traditional Jewish identity with the belief in Jesus as the Messiah. However, it is crucial to note that mainstream Jewish thought does not consider Messianic Judaism to be a legitimate form of Judaism, instead categorizing it as a branch of Christianity. In more recent years, there has been a noticeable rise in interfaith dialogue between Jewish and Christian communities. This growing dialogue has fostered increased mutual understanding, with some Christians developing a greater appreciation for the Jewish roots of Jesus, and some Jews re-examining traditional assumptions about Christianity. Nonetheless, it is essential to recognize that these evolving perspectives do not erase or diminish the fundamental theological differences that persist between the two faiths. The overwhelming majority of Jews, regardless of their level of religious observance, continue to reject the notion of Jesus as the Messiah or as a divine figure. The reasons we have explored earlier, differing theological interpretations, cultural identity, and deeply rooted historical experiences, continue to influence and uphold this position. Additionally, many Jews voice significant concerns about Christian missionary efforts targeted at Jewish communities, often viewing them as disrespectful to Jewish identity and religious beliefs. Organizations such as Jews for Judaism are actively engaged in countering these missionary activities and offering resources to help Jewish individuals respond to Christian evangelism. Simultaneously, there is a growing effort within certain Jewish circles to differentiate between appreciating Jesus' teachings and accepting him as a divine figure or the prophesied Messiah. As Rabbi Irving Greenberg explains, Jews can hold a deep respect for Jesus as a teacher of ethics and morality without embracing the theological claims about his divinity or messianic role. It is also important to note that in Israel, where Judaism is the majority faith, views on Jesus often differ significantly from those found in Jewish diaspora communities. The topic of Jesus in Israel is often approached with less emotional intensity, and there tends to be a greater willingness to engage with him purely as a historical figure. These contemporary perspectives highlight the multifaceted nature of Jewish identity in the modern 21st century. They reveal that, although the fundamental rejection of Jesus as the Messiah endures, the broader conversation about Jesus within Jewish thought has become increasingly nuanced and continues to evolve. Gaining a deeper understanding of these modern perspectives is vital for promoting meaningful interfaith conversations and fostering mutual respect and understanding between Jewish and Christian communities. It serves as a reminder that perspectives can evolve and adapt over time, even as the core tenets of one's faith and fundamental beliefs remain steadfast. As we bring this exploration to a close, it becomes clear that the Jewish rejection of Jesus as the Messiah is a deeply multifaceted issue, grounded in theological interpretations, historical experiences, cultural significance, and collective identity. This realization challenges us to engage in interfaith dialogues with profound respect, genuine empathy, and an open-minded willingness to understand perspectives different from our own. In this journey through the intricate landscape of Jewish views on Jesus, we have encountered significant theological divides, painful historical traumas, and the enduring strength of deeply rooted cultural identities. Now let us explore how this knowledge can be applied to foster greater understanding and mutual respect between Jewish and Christian communities. Above all, it is essential to approach this topic with a spirit of humility and a mindset of openness. Both Jewish and Christian communities must recognize that their perspective, while deeply meaningful to them, is not the sole valid viewpoint in the broader conversation. As the wise and ancient Jewish sage Hillel famously taught, "That which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow." That is the whole Torah. The rest is the explanation. Go and learn. Education plays a vital role in bridging gaps and fostering understanding. Christians who wish to better understand their Jewish neighbors should dedicate time to studying Jewish history, theology, and cultural practices. This process does not involve abandoning one's own faith, but instead cultivating a deeper appreciation for and understanding of the Jewish perspective. Likewise, Jewish individuals can gain valuable insights by exploring Christian theology and the rich diversity that exists within Christian traditions. Programs centered around interfaith dialogue have demonstrated remarkable success in fostering connections and building bridges between faith communities. Such forums create opportunities for open, honest, and respectful discussions about both the differences and the shared values between the two faiths. Initiatives like the Vatican's Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews and numerous local interfaith councils are excellent examples of efforts designed to promote this kind of meaningful dialogue. It is crucial to move past mere tolerance and work toward cultivating genuine respect for one another. This involves not only accepting another's right to hold their own beliefs, but also actively valuing the depth and richness of their religious and cultural traditions. As Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, often emphasized, the test of faith is whether I can make space for difference. For Christians, this could involve rethinking the ways they approach evangelism when engaging with Jewish communities. Rather than perceiving the Jewish rejection of Jesus as a problem to be addressed, it could be reframed as an opportunity to deepen one's own faith by engaging with and learning from an alternative perspective. As Pope Francis has eloquently stated, dialogue and friendship with the Jewish people are part of the life of Jesus' disciples. For Jewish communities, this might mean differentiating between the historical legacy of Christian anti-Semitism and the sincere efforts of modern Christians who seek understanding and friendship. It could also involve remaining open to learning about Christianity, free from the fear that doing so might compromise one's own identity or beliefs. Both Jewish and Christian communities can benefit by emphasizing the values and goals they share in common. Both Judaism and Christianity place a strong emphasis on ethical monotheism, the pursuit of social justice, and the inherent dignity and sanctity of human life. Working together to address social issues such as combating poverty, promoting global peace, and protecting the environment can help forge bonds that rise above theological divides. It is equally important to confront anti-Semitism and all other forms of religious intolerance and bigotry directly and decisively. Christian leaders bear the responsibility of educating their communities about the damaging historical legacy of anti-Semitism and taking proactive steps to eradicate it. Jewish leaders, on the other hand, can recognize and appreciate the significant positive changes in Christian attitudes toward Jews and Judaism over the years. In educational settings, courses on comparative religion and collaborative study programs can play a vital role in fostering mutual understanding. Programs such as the Center for Jewish-Christian Understanding and Cooperation in Israel are leading the way in establishing such groundbreaking initiatives. On an individual level, cultivating sincere friendships across religious boundaries can have a transformative and lasting impact. Coming together to share meals, celebrate each other's joyous moments, and provide comfort in times of hardship can help build meaningful connections that transcend theological differences. It is vital to remember that understanding another perspective does not necessarily mean agreeing with it. Jews and Christians can continue to uphold their distinct beliefs while fostering mutual respect and learning from one another's traditions and perspectives. As the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber wrote, the real dialogue is one in which each of the partners, even when he stands in opposition to the other, heeds, affirms, and confirms his opponent as an existing other. Finally, both communities can embrace the idea of holy envy, a concept that encourages admiration and learning from the strengths of another's faith tradition without feeling the need to compromise one's own beliefs. This perspective, championed by scholars such as Krister Stendahl, has the potential to deeply enrich the spiritual and intellectual lives of both faith traditions. In conclusion, closing the gap between Jewish and Christian perspectives on Jesus demands a great deal of patience, a spirit of empathy, and an openness to engage with ideas that may differ significantly from one's own. The goal is not to eliminate these differences, but to establish a space where they can coexist harmoniously and even enhance our understanding of faith and the shared human experience. By nurturing a spirit of understanding and respect, we pay tribute not only to our own religious traditions, but also contribute to creating a more peaceful and harmonious world, as the prophet Micah so powerfully stated. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God? With this spirit of justice, mercy, and humility, we can construct bridges of understanding, capable of spanning even the most significant theological divides.